But that seems to be the big one.
Yeah.
I'm really unqualified to talk about heroin because I've never taken it. Yeah. And I really don't intend to. There's, I'm sure it's just, it's probably just the best high, that's what it's down to. It's the one that gets them the highest, the quickest. But it just happens to kill you faster as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, they all sort of kill you in one way or another. And there's very few people who seem to be able to experience something like heroin and then get away from it. Mm-hmm. Because it just gets in the system and they become dependent on it. I don't know. It's sad, it's really sad because they're all looking for some deep love or something like that. And they miss it, Yeah. It's much better to try and not take any drugs, If you can get straight, really straight, then in a way it's much higher. I mean, I'm not really qualified to talk about that either. Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of in the middle, Yeah.
Another one of those little messages. We'll be back right after this one. Tomorrow night, my guest will be Danny Kaye. That was Jack Benny. Could you tell that? Could you tell that I was doing Jack Benny?
No.
Oh.
I don't know.
But seriously,
Jack Benny? They've never heard of Jack Benny in England.
You're kidding. When Jack Benny goes to they throw themselves at Jack Benny in England. Oh, yeah, he goes to the Palladium, and people just tear the place apart.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Jack Benny.
Fancy that.
Yep. You'll learn a lot here with me.
I can't watch TV in America, to tell you the truth. It's such a load of rubbish. Not the Dick Cavett show, of course.
I wondered.
No, it just drives you crazy, the commercials. You just get into something and it's sorry now, another word from, and another word from. And in the end, they just put commercials on all the time.
But you have commercials, too, over on your side of the pond.
But it's really done good, It's really done good. They show maybe, if it's a 30-minute show, they'll have the commercial at the beginning, then the show will start, and after 15 minutes or so, it'll end, and they say, end of part 1, ding, and then it goes into the commercial, and then the commercials end, and it says part 2. Here it just goes, ding, 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 from one into the next. You don't know if it's a commercial or if it's the show. I mean, it does some of the things.
Let's say there are a lot of commercials. I'll give you that. I have a serious question I want to ask you, and I have a feeling we're going to get interrupted before I get to. But I meant to get into this with John and with you.
Have you ever seen Monty Python's Flying Circus?
Yes. Yes.
Well,
very good.
You want to get that on in America. It's really good.
I thought of trying to get some of that and showing it.
Try and get some.
There wasn't time.
It's really good.
Yeah. Can I get to my serious question?
Yeah.
You have this tremendous influence, and you had, when you were together, you had this gigantic influence on the young people, right? And everybody knows that the Beatles went through a drug phase. Did it ever occur to you, or did you ever stop and think of it this way, that the fact that this was known and the fact that you were the Beatles might have caused thousands of kids to go into drug problems that might not have otherwise?
Well, no. Let him ask the question. Let him ask the question. First of all, when we took the notorious wonder drug LSD, it was we didn't know we were having it. John and I had this drug, and it was given. We were having dinner with our dentist, and he put it in our coffee and never told us. And we never heard of it. I mean, it's a good job we hadn't heard of it, because there's been so much paranoia created around the drug that people now, if they take it, they're already on a bad trip before they start. Whereas for us, we didn't know anything. We were so naive, and so we had it, and we went out to a club, and it was incredible. It was really incredible. So a couple of years later, Paul had the drug too. And the TV people in England came and they said, so you've had this wonder drug LSD. And he was saying, well, look, it's, the question you asked me about the responsibility for everybody else. Paul said to the TV people, look, I'm not saying if I had the drug, it's you. If you're going to ask me if I've had it, I'm going to say yes because I've had it. I'm not going to lie. So he said, they said, well, have you had LSD? And before they asked, he said, it's your responsibility, because if you're going to ask me and I'm going to say yes, and you're going to put it on the TV saying, yes, we've had LSD. So really, it was their fault. So they asked the question, Paul said yes, and then they put it on and said, oh, they've had LSD, and then the world goes crazy.
Yeah. I just wondered if if you have to stop and think about, you used the word responsibility, which is it always sounds so hokey when your school teacher says you have a tremendous responsibility. But did you ever take that kind of thing seriously and think, we got to watch ourselves because if we do this, other people will do that?
Yeah, we always had to watch ourselves.
Yeah.
Because if we weren't watching ourselves, there was somebody else out there who was.
Yeah.
And there was always reporters who'd follow us around on tour and always try breaking into our room, catching us doing something.
Yeah.
Something maybe that we shouldn't have been doing. And the whole thing is that people want other people to do nasty things because they feed off it. And then they write, they're doing nasty things. It's like in a newspaper in England. I met David Frost the other day. Can I say David Frost, or do you bleep it out?
Once.
Okay. I bumped into him in the hotel and he said, here, to really bring you down, is a copy of the News of the World. He'd just come from England. He brought this paper, and there's a big story on the front saying...
That's the scandal sheet in England.
Yeah. But it's a big story saying about this group called the Marmalade, how they had orgies with their teenage fans and all this sort of thing. But the whole idea of these reporters going out for months and months, scraping around, lifting up the pavement, trying to see what rubbish there is to write about. And then they write about it as if they're saints and as if everybody isn't doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know where the responsibility... I mean, maybe you just should stay at home and never say anything. That's definitely the easiest.
Or why do people do things just because famous people do them is another question I've never been able to figure out exactly. Indian music and drugs don't mix, as I understand it.
No, there's been a big...
Ravi Shankar said so.
Yeah. There was a problem. The Indian music really got popular during that 66, 67, all the psychedelic period. And I think from that, most people have started to associate it with drugs because the hippies... Apart from the classical people who used to go and watch the music anyway, like the hippie people at that time were the ones who caught on to Indian music, and it just happens that most of them were, like smoking pot or something. And since then, I don't know, maybe Ravi will be able to explain how the two got caught up together, but it's really a problem. It's a problem for Ravi because he's there, trying to do this. Spent years and years of real disciplined life in order to play this music, and then people think, he must have taken dope to play that good, and it's really it's a terrible thing, when somebody's it's completely the opposite. The audience are really misunderstanding what the whole thing's about.
Maybe we can get him to talk about that.
Yeah.
If we don't go now, we won't have time. We have a message from our local stations, and we'll have time. Because I didn't get to go to that concert, the Bangladesh concert, but I heard all about it. They're really ahead of us, aren't they? It's supposed to be one of the best things ever done of this kind, and one of the most successful charity things of this kind that anybody ever put together. And did you get the idea just sitting alone one day, or how did it come to you?
It was Ravi Shankar's idea. He wanted to do something like this, and he was talking to me and telling me about his concern for the thing and asking me if I had any suggestions. Then, after half an hour, he talked me into being on the show. And so, once I decided I was going to go onto the show, then that was it. I just had to try and get a band together and set up. I organised the things with a little help from my friends for Madison Square Garden. And that's it. It just snowballed, and the whole thing was thought of and planned and executed all within about 4 weeks.
Yeah. And it raised an enormous amount of money. And now, the thing that always bothered me was, how do you know that the victims of the problems in India and in Pakistan will get the money that you raise at a thing like that? Where does it go? Once it goes into the Madison Square Garden box office, then how does it get to the people that you see starving?
Well, there was, because this concert was done with such short time for preparation, also because so many of these concerts were rip-offs, we wanted to ensure that we could do the concert and nobody would think that we were keeping the money ourselves. So there was such a short time. There was only like 3 weeks by the time we'd more or less decided the concert was going on, and then we had the date set for Madison Square Garden, which was like the only available day that we had there. So we decided the best thing would be to give the money and say out front that this money is going to such and such a charity, and then we checked different things out. We're going to give it to the Red Cross. This was the first idea. We give the money to the American Red Cross, who in turn could give it to the Indian Red Cross, but then we heard so many different stories about the Red Cross and how there's, hurricanes hit some place in America and they just take care of the whites and all the blacks are there and they're not taking care of them. So you hear so many different stories about things.
I hadn't heard that.
Well, we heard so many stories about all different organizations. In the end, we had to really say what we were going to give the money to. So we said we'll give the money to UNICEF, and they have to say to us exactly what they need, and they can come to us and say we need this and this and this, and then we'll sign the check and let them buy the things they need. So the concert made $250,000, which actually is really very small in terms of the amount of money we're going to make from the record.
The record and probably the film.
But the record... for the record, I'm hoping when we've realized some of the money, which should be around January, if the record comes out at all this year. That's another problem. We're having a slight problem with record company. But if the record does come out early December, by mid-January we should have realized quite a lot of money, a few $1 million. At that time, Ravi was going to be in India, so I was going to go out there, get the money into India, and then I'll take it there myself, because I don't want the money to get lost. It's taken, 3 or 4 months' work to do it. I don't want the money to end up in somebody's pocket.
I guess you better... I know this is the concert that people saw pictures of in the magazines. Bob Dylan showed up as a surprise, at least to the audience, and all. Well, let's just
take... It's a surprise to me, too.
Was it really a surprise?
Yes.
Yeah. Will you do that kind of thing again, do you think? It seems like a very good idea.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Maybe. I thought that, you see, it's difficult for... Not all musicians are rich enough through record sales or such like to be able to donate their services all the time. So I figured a good way to do it would be maybe 2 concerts in each town, like similar to Madison Square. The first show, we keep the money, and the second show, we give the money to the charity. That way we can feed the starving musicians, and the second, we can feed the people.
Yeah.
I think that sounds
fair. They criticize rock groups for being over-commercialized on the one hand, and yet the members of them are supposedly socially conscious on the other hand. So it seems like this is a wonderful way of combining those two things. If you can draw a lot of money, ridiculous sums by the average person's reckoning, then why not do it this way? There must be loophole. There must be other problems. Are there? Is the government suspicious of anything that is passed off?
I don't think so.
Because you say there have been rip-off concerts.
Yeah. I think if you take sort of precautions, which is really when we said we'd give the money to UNICEF for the concert, that was really a precaution, because too many things could have gone wrong. And it would have been terrible to have done the concert and for it to turned out really bad. So many concerts turn out bad, like that thing the Stones did, and people getting killed, and it's really bad. So it's very important, I think, for something to come out really good, that feels good, and the people that actually does something.
Yeah. George said that he had so the Red Cross shouldn't get too upset. He had said that he had heard bad things about all organizations and good things, and it just became very hard to know which is which, and that's one of the things that makes it hard to do this. So the Red Cross should not feel particularly singled out. Right?
Right.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's just what I heard, I've heard things about everybody, about... I've heard a lot about you.
Oh, no. Well, it's only a 90-minute show. We won't have time to go into that. What have you heard?
No, whatever you try to do, you know, somebody would say, don't give it to the Red Cross, give it to them. So you say, okay, we'll give it to them. And then somebody writes saying, don't give it to them, you know, they're terrible. Yeah, every move you make